give a big virtual round of applause to Jordan and welcome her to the App Promotion Summit USA stage. Jordan, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Yeah, my name's Jordan. I lead marketing here at Dave. I'm Jordan. This is Queso in the background. He's calm now, so let's hope he remains calm for the rest of this session. And I'm here to talk to you about how we scaled Dave from 80,000 users to now 7 million. We have Dave is the gorilla. He's not always in a gorilla suit, but we thought it's funny, like gorilla marketing kind of thing. So we began acquisition for Dave in February of 2018. It was right around when I joined. We had 80,000 users. Now we're looking at about 7 million users within the Dave app. We closed our unicorn round with Norwest last August, and we have about 300,000 five-star reviews in the App Store. So if you haven't heard of Dave, Dave is Dave the Bear. He's really meant to be your financial friend. So what you do is you go ahead and connect your checking account within the Dave app, and he's able to forecast your lowest balance before payday. And with that lowest balance before payday, he's able to send you alerts on whether or not you're going to overdraft your checking account. And if you're going to overdraft your checking account, you're able to pop right into the app and request up to $75, 0% interest. So it's meant to be a really small amount to just help you get through till payday. So things that users often use the advance on is gas, groceries, really the essentials. And we're really trying to get people out of that cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. So one of the ways that we do that is we have a product called Side Hustle. And Side Hustle connects you to different side gigs within the app, and it's aimed to really earn you additional income. And we are also launching Dave Banking, which is super exciting. So you can see it here. We have our new Dave debit card. So a lot of times when people ask me about Dave and they say, what did you start with? And I wish I had this beautiful framework to really reference, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much. You know, we can build out marketing communication, organic social, you know, branded creative. There's so much. And really what I knew is that we needed to make ads and I needed creative to make ads. So what I started doing was just making things on my phone. You'll be able to see here, I'm not a creative genius by any stretch, but the first thing that I had access to was my phone and me. So I started just filming a lot of selfie videos of myself. And what I would do is test different hooks, different call to actions, sunglasses on, sunglasses off, hair flip, no hair flip. Learned very quickly that the hair flip, oddly, a great performer. And while it seemed really silly, we were able to test a ton this way, what messaging worked. We learned that, you know, starting a video with a question, moving your camera within the first 2 seconds, all incredibly important in building a really high performing asset. While selfie videos were great, I also needed to go ahead and shoot videos of other people so we could show the app a little bit more. So what I would do is embarrass my friends at gas stations. I don't know if I was the most popular friend, but very thankful to have people. So these videos don't look great, and they still don't, but what we really learned here was testing different thumbnails, testing different actors, testing just showing the app work, like what location performs the best. And some of these learnings we still use. That initial thumbnail where you see the low gas icon still performs really well. We learned that no surprise, showing the app performs really well. Different actors perform better than others. And so these are all learnings that we still very much use at a different scale that we're at now. Something else that we did in the early stage that we still do now is respond to Facebook comments as Dave. So as I mentioned, Dave's a bear. He's a very sarcastic, sassy bear. He has lots of opinions. So basically what I started realizing was happening is people would respond on these Facebook comments to Dave. And so I just started like messaging them back as Dave, and it kind of evolved into this odd thing where people will talk for hundreds of comments to Dave. And I have this very loose style guide that, you know, Dave likes tacos, Dave likes specific shows, and he really gets into these intense conversations. And Dave's had marriage proposals, all types of things. But why that's actually valuable on the growth side is that when I've been commenting with people, you'll get hundreds of comments. And so when you have hundreds of comments on an ad, it looks so much more organic to someone's feed. Because I mean, I'm sure you guys know, but like most ads don't have that many comments. And if the goal is to get someone to stop their thumb, it's kind of this good first step of, oh, this has hundreds of comments. What is actually going on here? And then, you know, they stop their thumb and they see this really quick video hook. Oftentimes, are you guys broke like me? For Dave. And so those like quick things tend to perform really well. So it was this really unique opportunity to engage with Dave, which was great. And it also needed really limited resources to execute. So at the beginning, it was just me doing it. And now I have a team of 3 community managers who respond to potential users as Dave. And it's been really powerful because in those early days when we didn't really have, you know, access to like full-time headcount, I was able to find, I'm in LA, so I was able to find a lot of like unemployed actors to do things like this. And they're really great. I mean, they're comedy writers, so all of their responses are oftentimes really funny and engaging. And so kind of in this early stage, what I really learned was a few different things. One, test every creative you can to identify wins. You can make so much creative on your phone and with different apps. So my big takeaway was just don't sit in these rooms and like ideate for hours. Just go make things and you'll be kind of shocked what you get. Fail small and build on wins. I'll get into this in the next portion on TV, but I think it's really easy to, when you're building something, to think of like the big vision down the line on, you know, a billboard or like investing in a really expensive influencer. But now with mobile growth, you can test so much for really small budgets, just like on Snapchat, Facebook, anything. I mean, my minimum budgets then were like $30 a day, and I'd be able to test just everything. And so when you're in these really early phases, I think it's so helpful just to fail small so you can just test more. And once you've like learned what's working, keep building upon it. Something else is that lack of resources, I really don't think are an excuse. I hear all the time like, oh, I don't have a creative team, but you can make such great creative on your phone. It doesn't look the best, but you can often get a long way with that. So once we started kind of spending more on digital and doing this really scrappy form of growth marketing, we started to see our growth kind of level out a bit. And we were trying to spend more, but like our CPA would go up, but we weren't actually acquiring more users. And I'd heard from tons of people how powerful TV was. And I know I was one of those people who would argue with my marketing professor in college how like no one would watch TV anymore. But we ended up finding that TV was really powerful to us. So we turned to TV when we saw spend increase, but our CPA increased kind of with it. So we weren't acquiring more users. And TV, what we were able to do was scale just a lot more because there's so much inventory. I was really hesitant to try TV because I had had this kind of philosophy from the beginning of fail small and iterate on big wins. And when we were talking to our agency, they were suggesting all these different creative partners to make TV creative, and it was super, super expensive. And I was really nervous on hedging that big bet. So what we did was a very Dave Scrappy thing and made this $250 creative to air on TV. You'll see it does not look great, but here.
Are you broke before payday? No worries, just download Dave. Dave can spot you up to $75 because a little extra cash can go a long way. Don't wait. Download Dave now for your advance.
So it's pretty, honestly, like janky when you look at it. It costs $250. We ended up spending a ton of money on this ad, and it crushed it in performance. Like absolutely crushed it. So then we realized, okay, I mean, TV seems to be a channel worth testing. So we went ahead and invested in a lot more expensive of a creative.
Hey, is estate is going pretty good. Your card's been declined, or maybe not. No big deal. Dave has your back. If you're a little short, it can give you a cash advance of up to $75 with 0 interest. Dave, download for free now.
So I personally think that creative looks a whole lot better. But what we learned is that this $250 one ended up performing, I think, 4x better and able to hold more spend. So it was a really interesting learning for us. And so now we just created some new ones that are going to go live next Tuesday. And it's sort of an in-between where it has that Scrappy style that really focuses on the app, but increases the production value. And so some of the initial learnings from TV was you can be pretty scrappy with creative on the front end. I mean, you need somewhat of a level of production quality to get approved on TV. But I personally think you should test to see whether TV is actually a viable channel for you and what creative works before investing a ton of money on a creative. You also have to be really flexible during the learning phase with TV. I was really used to looking at like digital dashboards and understanding attribution pretty perfectly. But something that I had to get used to was a CPA on TV was going to look very different than what I would see in Facebook. But what started to happen was that we saw such increased scale on TV. So when we were at that place where we were kind of stuck and couldn't really increase our speed of user growth, once we turned TV on, everything kind of changed. And so while it doesn't directly reflect in TV, you start to see a halo effect on all digital channels. So digital channels were suddenly able to hold a lot more spend at a stable CPA, and just our overall scale was able to increase. And so here are some potential pitfalls or things to think about when scaling. These are pretty broad, but I think are really worthwhile things to think about. So first one, this seems so kind of crazy to say, but will it grow or shrink your growth? Oftentimes I hear people ask me questions or just hear conversations about like, you know, is this the perfect attribution model, or like what's exactly happening here? And oftentimes the answer to that question is going to be you pulling back spend. And I think when you're in these really early phases, you have to only focus on what's actually going to like grow your business. So just building new things. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. Is it repeatable and scalable? Not everyone agrees with me on this, but for example, we haven't spent really like any time doing anything special for the holidays, for example. I think if you're in certain businesses that are more seasonal, it makes sense. But for us, we only focus on things that are evergreen. If it can't be always on and scale big, we just don't do it because we've always had a small team. And I think it's really important to focus on what has the highest possible impact. I mean, it's kind of crazy at this point, but like we haven't had organic social media just because we found that other things drive the highest impact. So I think really forcing yourself to think what can drive the most value is what's important to work on. And I think some things can be nice to have, they may look nice, but really force yourself to think of what's going to move the needle here. And sometimes you have to think like, is the current solution good enough? I know for us, one rabbit hole we went down was we were using Last Touch and we wanted to build a perfect multi-touch attribution model. It spent a ton of time. It was this really interesting kind of academic project that I love thinking about that stuff. But the reality was it was a ton of time and it barely changed the way we did things. And so looking back, it honestly wasn't really a great use of time. Unless we're going to change something dramatically, why spend weeks on this almost academic project? And does best practice actually work? I know Facebook, for example, has a lot of suggestions, and we always try best practice, but if it's not working, just think outside the box. I have always found just some weird hacks by kind of forcing yourself to think a little differently. So even if something's best practice, there might be another way that might be best for you and your app. So I think just always forcing yourself to think out of the box is really helpful. And some key takeaways, just do it. You really will never know what performs until you test it. I honestly have spent very little time with my marketing team in rooms brainstorming. I try my best to empower people to just go build things, go do things. And what works, we do more of. What doesn't, we move on to the next thing. But I think you can often waste a lot of time just like ideating, because until you actually see what performs, it's hard to make a really good decision. Listen to the data and iterate wins, and also work on really high impact deliverables. I think it's really easy, again, to get stuck on like, oh, this brand's doing this, or I love this idea, but just do a small test, see whether it's interesting, and if it is, then keep building. But don't just get something out there and see what happens. Also, recognize quickly when your current strategy isn't working anymore. What's going to get you from like 0 to 1 million and then 1 to 3 will probably be different things. And I know I would be in these phases where just banging my head against the wall, like, why isn't this working? It used to. And you just have to constantly be forcing yourself to change. Something I say is that my job changes like every 2 weeks to a month, and it really has to be able to keep growing. And you just have to be honest with yourself. This isn't working. We got to find something new. So empowering yourself, empowering your team to just go build and try new things, I think can be the most powerful. It's not always the most pretty. You don't always have the most documented frameworks, but I think the results can really speak for themselves. And yeah, that's it. Thanks guys for listening.
Great. Well, thanks, Jordan. That was really excellent, and really loved the message around starting now, get perfect later, and the 80-20. And we hear all these things all the time, but you know, it's not always that easy to put into practice, especially if you're working with a big team or investors and all the other things. I love how you managed to do that. I mean, we got quite a lot of questions, so yeah, hopefully we'll try and get through them. But I have a question to sort of kick off. You sort of mentioned at the end of your talk about the different stages and things that stopped working. Could you say a bit more about that sort of journey and what worked initially and then stopped working, and how have things changed as you've progressed through those different levels?
Yeah, at the beginning, for example, we were able to just spend more and more on digital, and it got to this point where we just couldn't, performance just kept getting worse. And we were using these strategies to improve performance that were like these super specific lookalikes or super specific creative, where we try to get it really tailored to people. And what we realized was when we were trying to grow big, just being that specific wasn't really driving the needle. So what we started doing was creating these kind of bizarre creative shoots where we'll have 6 setups, for example. So one will look like a kitchen, one will look like a gas station, and we'll bring on 10 different actors in different races, different ages, and just cycle them through. And we're able to film just hundreds of creative that way. And so we're able to just test a ton of different things for really, really cheap, because we're just cycling people through almost like a kind of factory.
Got it. And in terms of that journey, you started off talking about the UGC, almost a UGC, or your kind of homebrew ads you're filming yourself. And in terms of the anatomy of those ads, was that created for an app install ad, or were you trying to get them actually just to sort of go on your landing page and then retarget them? How are we using that sort of creative?
Yeah, most of our creative, except for TV, is app install ads.
Right.
We do some retargeting, but it's mainly app install.
Right, and that was effective. Just the very simple videos you're doing. I thought that was amazing. Yeah, and then you mentioned about the replying as Dave and the comments, but yet you said you didn't do any organic social media. So was that replies to the ads? Was it?
Yeah,
right.
It's all replies to ads.
Right.
So at the beginning of every ad, we'll just say "Hi, this is Dave," and then people will comment to Dave, and then we'll just talk to them. That's really it's weird because it is organic, but it's on paid.
Got it. And I suppose that sort of drills in now to some of the questions. So Jesse was asking, do you think having this mascot like Dave has made the app stand out from the competition? How valuable is it having a mascot? I can certainly see in that example, people are more likely to reply to your ad.
Dave is the bear is so funny, and it's a really kind of hot topic for us. Something that we've been talking a lot about how to use him, especially as we're kind of moving into banking. So Dave used to be just a white guy, and then we ended up making him Dave the Bear. I don't think it helps a ton for like acquisition, but in the reviews, people talk about Dave as he, and like people have this more personal relationship with the app, I think, because of Dave the Bear. So I don't know if it's like mandatory. It does seem to help, in my opinion. It's harder to track, it's harder to measure, but people do seem to have a strong affinity for Dave the Bear.
And I guess, well, you've also lined up with the name of the brand, and so it's pretty well integrated. Yeah. And Nicole's asking about geolocation and targeting. Were you doing national campaigns from the start, or were you focusing on specific kind of metro areas, or how were you managing all that?
We mostly do national. We target to really specific actions within the app, and then we kind of like let it go from there. There are certain locations that just naturally have become more popular for us, but it hasn't been super targeted. The only real exception was our app is kind of seasonal based on user spending behavior. And so when everyone was under lockdown, but certain states were opening, we were doing more local campaigns on like what states were open, and that was performing well. But in general, we do national.
Great. And Gillian's asking about, how were you tracking conversions in the early stages? And you mentioned, what were you looking at there?
Yeah, at the beginning we used Adjust, and now we use AppsFlyer for our attribution. And different, we've I guess kind of evolved like the events that we optimize towards. At the beginning, we targeted like more top of funnel. And then as we scaled, we just had to have more control. So now what we optimize towards is like a lot more down funnel.
Right. And a couple of people were asking about, tracking the KPIs on the TV campaigns. And you kind of touched on this briefly that, there's various different ways to measure this, but can be a lot of work. But, what were you, what did you actually look at?
Yeah, so what we use in the dashboard is spot attribution. So basically, we send over a baseline of our organic installs, and then the 5 minutes after a TV spot airs, we'll see this boost of installs, and we'll track the lift, and then we'll attribute that to TV. But it's a super small attribution window, and it's probabilistic, so it's not perfect by any stretch. So we definitely measure that, and we optimize towards it, and that's what we report on. But as far as really like my reason for allocating budget to TV, it's less so on those metrics and kind of overall scale, and then also digital performance. So it's really not perfect. It's definitely more of an art than a science where we are now. I know some people have built out more complex attribution for TV, but we just aren't there yet.
It's interesting you said there's this real halo effect, and you could just tell instinctively that it was getting easier on some of the other channels, and you're just pushing a more of an open door, and it's kind of someone's asking, Chris is asking, what sort of minimum ad spend do you need on TV to get in?
So we started, I think our initial pilot was like 150,000, but I've heard now that's starting to change, and you can start to get in for a lot cheaper.
Got it. And Stephen's asking, well, if you were starting from scratch now with a new app to do Dave again, what channels would you look at? Would you do the same thing now? Do you think it would work now, or would you use maybe be doing TikTok or something else?
I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to say. I feel like I would probably have a similar strategy of just like trying a bunch of things and kind of seeing what stuck. Yeah, but I think the overall strategy, I don't know if I would change, but I think I had a lot more learnings on like how to build a team and structure a team that I would do differently.
In terms of,
Yeah, like I think what I would have done is at the beginning I hired like a lot more junior people to execute, but I think if I would do it all again, I would hire just like at a higher level of people who could really own things and drive strategy on their end. Since I've made that shift, we're just able to do a lot more since everything doesn't have to come from me anymore.
got it. And Gillian's asking about your tech stack. You mentioned, some attribution stuff, apps flyer and adjust. What else did you have? Maybe you can talk about what evolution as well, what you had in the early days when you were just trying to get something going, and then what you're sort of building now.
Yeah, in the early days, we really just had Adjust and then like Google Sheets. And then now we use upstart for attribution. And then we use a couple different tools to pull in our spend data. And then we visualize it in Tableau.
Got it.
And they have a mobile app, so you can just like always track your metrics.
Right. So it's pretty simple stack. You're not, plugging in, huge amounts of tech. And yeah. And someone is saying, anonymous attendee is saying, thanks for your insights, Jordan. How long did it take you to get from 80K to 100K and then to 1 million and then to 5 million? And, did you see a sort of domino effect where suddenly, the first 80K was the hardest and then it got a lot easier, or how did that play out?
I don't remember the exact time on each. We were at 80K in February 2018, and then now at 7 million. I think probably the hardest though was like almost 1 to 3 million. I don't like, because we were using all these really small scrappy strategies that just weren't, they were just harder to get past that mark.
And how did you get through that stage then?
TV definitely was really helpful in getting past it. And I think just like doing more things. We were really reliant on only paid UA, and I think really starting to focus on even like marketing communication, which we hadn't built out. So probably like, I guess that 3 million has been really, really powerful. So I think just like doing more basically.
It's interesting, yeah, you experimenting at the sort of smaller level got you to the next, and then you're saying, yeah, even at a bigger level, again, it was experimenting, and you hit on TV, and then marketing communications. Do you mean sort of the messaging or the sort of campaign, the creative? And
yeah, really kind of all of it. We didn't start even building out like emails until pretty late, just because it was only driving like small lift. But then at larger scales, like that small lift becomes meaningful. So yeah, like there wasn't really one thing. It was more of just like adding more channels and really just building more and more.
Okay, great. We're hoping to beat our record for the most number of questions asked and answered today. So let's keep going if that's okay, Jordan. Nate, we'll just keep going through. Nathan, he's asking, how have you done much in programmatic or the kind of using a DSP or a bidder, or are you mainly buying on Facebook and Google and the big platforms?
We've done testing with it, and it hasn't ever been as effective for some reason for us as like paid social and search has been. So we've done tests, but it's not a significant portion of our growth spend.
Got it. And a couple of people asking about user retention. So if you're optimizing to an install, how are you making sure that you retain these users and it's not just a leaky bucket?
Yeah, at the beginning, we mainly optimized towards installs, and now we optimize pretty far down the funnel. And so we basically just keep a really close eye on what events we're optimizing towards to make sure they're like users that are actually like likely to stay within the app. And then we have a pretty robust product marketing team now, and they're really focused on just making sure users are still engaging with the app and bringing them back in.
Got it. And on that sort of question of team, you've got marketing, you're building out kind of product marketing, CRM, and then there's the product team as well. Solomon is asking in the chat, how do you interface with product for A/B testing and other experiments? How does that work?
Yeah, so the marketing team right now is made up of like user acquisition, creative, product marketing, and then a marketing data team as well. And then we just work really closely with product. So I have a growth product manager who's on maternity leave now, so I miss her dearly. But normally I work really closely with our growth product manager, and she owns a lot of like our onboarding optimization and just different product changes within the app.
Great. And a couple of people asking, the balance between all the platforms, maybe give us a rough kind of sense. So yeah, programmatic's pretty small, but how does it break down across, Facebook, Google UAC, search ads, TV?
Yeah, it honestly changes like a lot, kind of depending on what we're doing, but I try to not have it really rely on one thing. So we try to like keep it as a pretty even mix.
Right. Okay, so sort of balanced across and then optimizing as you go. And then in terms of sort of scaling up those campaigns, yeah, you started very small. Natalie is asking, well, how have you had issues trying to scale Facebook or Apple search ads campaigns? Have the CPIs been shooting up, and have you managed that?
Yeah, so it's been different. For like Facebook and different social platforms, for us, it's been mainly about building more creative and finding creative that works. And then for Apple search, it's really about honestly scaling TV. Unless you scale intent, it's just really hard to scale search.
Got it. And yeah, we've got some great comments. People, Vivi is saying that was amazing. Thank you, Jordan. Love the insight and energy. So yeah, people seem to have enjoyed it. So that's great. What I think we've mainly covered, hopefully covered most of people's questions. Nicole's is awesome as well. So yeah, and definitely that was definitely one of the most interesting talks I think we've had. We've been doing this since 2013, and yeah, it's always some talks always stand out, and I love how you sort of shared, the journey of going from very small and scrappy to scaling to where you are now. And yeah, I know we all really appreciate you taking the time to share it with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. And well, who knows, hopefully we can do a follow-up, maybe at a future event in the real world or online. And yeah, thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hope to meet some of you in person one day.
Thank you.
Thanks.